Get out!
Revenge Files with Nora. File 11. Danielle. I filed 14 formal complaints with HR over 14 months. 14 times, I documented gender discrimination, pay inequity, and retaliation. 14 times, Warren Nichols, our chief HR officer, told me the same thing. We'll look into it. They never looked into it. So I stopped asking HR. I asked the EEOC instead. 6 months later, Pinnacle Financial Group wrote a check for $4.2 million. Warren Nichols was terminated. 3 executives were forced to resign, and the company that ignored my complaints, they now have my name on their mandatory compliance training. Here's how I made the system work when the system refused to work for me. I'd been at Pinnacle Financial Group for 11 years. Started as a junior compliance analyst, fresh out of Fordham Law. Worked my way up to senior compliance officer, one of 3 in the entire firm. Pinnacle managed $12 billion in client assets, 800 employees across 4 floors of a midtown tower on Park Avenue. The kind of firm where the lobby had marble floors and the executive suite had better views than most penthouses. I was good at my job. Really good. Compliance isn't glamorous, it's documentation, regulation tracking, risk assessment, audit preparation. But I understood something most people didn't. In financial services, compliance isn't just paperwork. It's protection. For the clients, for the firm, for the people who work there. At least that's what I believed. My morning routine never changed. 6 a.m. run through Central Park. I lived on the Upper West Side, close enough to hit the reservoir loop before sunrise. Protein smoothie from the Bodega on Columbus. Subway by 7:15. At my desk by 8, coffee from the break room, laptop open, inbox cleared before the trading floor woke up. 11 years of that routine. 11 years of reliability. My sister Emily called me the most predictable person in Manhattan. She wasn't wrong. I liked structure. I liked knowing what came next. I liked systems that worked the way they were supposed to work. That's probably why it took me so long to accept that Pinnacle's systems were broken. The first complaint I filed was in March, 2 years before everything fell apart. The numbers didn't lie, but I kept rechecking them anyway, hoping I'd made a mistake. I'd noticed a pattern. 3 women in my department, all senior analysts, all with comparable experience and performance reviews, were being paid significantly less than their male counterparts. Not slightly less. 15 to 20% less. This wasn't something that could be overlooked, at least not according to my moral compass. Preparing that first document, my hands were trembling. This wasn't just an Excel spreadsheet, it was the first shot in my war against the system. I spent quite a bit of time doing thorough research. It wasn't research that would just float away either. I documented everything, pulled compensation data, cross-referenced with performance metrics, built a spreadsheet that showed the disparity wasn't random, it was systematic. The cursor blinked at cell A1 for 5 minutes before I started typing. Once I began, I didn't stop for 3 hours. I rehearsed my presentation 3 times in the elevator. By the 42nd floor, I knew it wouldn't matter. I brought it to Warren Nichols, Chief HR Officer, 22 years at Pinnacle, the kind of executive who wore suspenders and called everyone sport. Maybe that's why I chose to go to him first. Have you ever had a manager like that? Warren's office was on the 42nd floor, corner view. Family photos on the credenza. There was a framed quote on the wall, "Our people are our greatest asset." Quite a bold claim. I sat across from his mahogany desk and walked him through my findings. Danielle. He leaned back in his leather chair. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. So you'll address it. We'll look into it." I waited. I saw no reason why he wouldn't keep his word, but nothing happened. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. 42 floors to realize nothing would change. Walking out of his office, I understood something. "We'll look into it" meant they never would. Have you ever gotten that response at work? 3 months later, I filed a second complaint. Same issue. Updated data. New examples. "We'll look into it." 4 months after that, a third complaint. This time, I added retaliation concerns. One of the women I'd advocated for had been passed over for promotion that went to a less qualified male colleague. I filed the 4th complaint on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, I'd already stopped checking my email for his response. Warren's response was the same. "We'll look into it." His voice had the same tone every time. practiced, polite, empty. By complaint number 7, I'd stopped expecting action. But I kept filing anyway, because that's what compliance officers do. We document, we create paper trails, we build records. I didn't know it then, but I was building a case. The culture at Pinnacle was what HR consultants would call traditional. What that really meant, the executive suite was 90% male, the board was entirely male, the holiday party featured golf jokes and whiskey tastings. Edward Sterling had been CEO for 18 years, old school finance, the kind of leader who believed problems should be handled internally, who saw external complaints as disloyalty, who thought HR existed to protect the company from employees, not the other way around. The executive suite had a cigar humidor. The women's bathroom on the same floor had a broken lock that stayed broken for 8 months. I'd met with him exactly twice in 11 years. Both times, he'd called me sweetheart. The senior leadership team met every Monday at 8 a.m. I wasn't invited. Compliance officers weren't part of strategic discussions, but I knew what happened in those meetings. The same thing that happened everywhere at Pinnacle, decisions made by men, for men, about men. Women at Pinnacle learned to navigate, to smile through the condescension, to document quietly and hope someone would eventually listen. After being ignored 7 times, you start questioning yourself. What was I doing wrong? I documented for 14 months. Even for me, it required patience, but no one listened to the truth my documents showed. By January, I'd filed 11 formal complaints. Each one acknowledged, each one ignored. My file with HR was thick enough to qualify as a novella. And then came the 12th complaint, the one that changed everything. A junior analyst named Rachel Torres came to my office on a Tuesday afternoon. She was 26. Brilliant. The kind of employee Pinnacle should have been grooming for leadership. She knocked twice, softly, like she was afraid someone might hear. She closed the door behind her, sat down, didn't make eye contact. I need to report something, she said, but I don't know if I should. Whatever it is, I'll help you navigate it. She kept rubbing her hands together and checking her surroundings, and finally she started to talk. She was quiet for a long moment. My supervisor, Ryan Mercer, he's been making comments about my appearance, about what I wear. He asked me to drinks 3 times. When I said no, he started assigning me to the worst projects, leaving me off important emails, telling people I wasn't a team player. I felt my jaw tighten. I could understand why she was anxious. Have you documented this? She nodded. Screenshots, emails, dates and times of every comment. She pulled a folder from her bag. I've been keeping records for 6 months. The folder was thin. 6 months of harassment, documented on 11 pages. It should have been enough, 6 months. She'd been enduring this for 6 months, documenting alone, afraid to speak up. You did the right thing, I said. The situation was heading to a point beyond what I'd even thought. We're going to file a formal complaint. I walked her through the process, helped her organize her evidence, filed the complaint with Warren Nichols that same afternoon. 3 days later, guess what happened? Rachel Torres was terminated. The termination letter was dated the same day as her complaint. They hadn't even pretended to investigate. The official reason? Performance concerns. The real reason? She'd spoken up. I wondered when they would notice my performance issues. Could it be that the documents I had were the reason they hadn't yet? I watched Rachel clean out her desk. It was clear from her face that she was disappointed and had lost faith. She didn't deserve this. She was 26 years old. Her career had been derailed because she'd trusted the system, because she'd trusted me. She fit her entire career into a single cardboard box. It took her 12 minutes. In that moment, everyone in the office knew why Rachel was packing up her desk, but nobody said a word. Fear is silence's best tool. Ever witnessed something wrong but stayed quiet? I'd told her we'd file a complaint. I'd told her it would be handled. I felt responsible. Not directly, perhaps, but I'd made the wrong decision. By trusting the system, by trusting Warren Nichols. Warren Nichols had handled it all right. He'd handled it by eliminating the problem, and Rachel was the problem. That night, I sat in my apartment on the Upper West Side and stared at my laptop screen. 14 complaints. 14 months. 1 retaliated employee. 0 accountability. The internal system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed to protect the company from consequences, not to protect employees from harm. I'd been filing complaints with HR for over a year. HR reported to Warren. Warren reported to Edward. Edward wanted problems handled internally. The chain of command was the problem. I needed to break the chain. It was clear I couldn't solve the problem from within the system. Have you ever trusted the system only to be left hanging halfway? I was having trouble gathering my thoughts. The scene of Rachel packing up her desk wouldn't leave my mind. After calming down a bit, I opened a new browser tab and typed 4 letters, EEOC. When I moved my mouse to the submit button, I hesitated. There was no going back after this. I was no longer just a complaining employee, I was the company's enemy. Would you have hit that button? The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Federal agency. Investigates workplace discrimination. Has the authority to subpoena records, interview witnesses, and impose settlements that companies can't ignore. Warren Nichols couldn't dismiss the EEOC with "We'll look into it." I spent 3 hours reading, understanding the process, learning what documentation I'd need, realizing that everything I'd been filing internally, every complaint, every spreadsheet, every unanswered email was exactly what the EEOC would want to see. I'd been building a federal case without knowing it. By 2 a.m., I'd made my decision. Monday morning, I wasn't going to file complaint number 15 with Warren Nichols. I was going to file a complaint with the federal government. And Pinnacle Financial Group was going to learn the difference between an internal nuisance and a legal obligation. Monday, I called in sick, first time in 3 years. I spent the entire day at my kitchen table, organizing 14 months of documentation, complaint forms, response emails that said, "We'll look into it," performance reviews, Rachel's termination paperwork, compensation spreadsheets. I printed everything twice, one set for Jennifer, one set for me. Insurance against their next move, 247 pages. A paper trail Warren Nichols had never expected to see daylight. I'd been backing everything up to Dropbox for months, every complaint, every email thread, every response organized by date and category. Cloud storage meant the evidence existed somewhere Pinnacle couldn't touch it. I kept a backup drive in my gym locker. Pinnacle couldn't touch my 6 a.m. runs or my evidence. I called an employment attorney that afternoon, Jennifer Walsh, a partner at a boutique firm in Tribeca specializing in workplace discrimination. "How many complaints did you file internally?" she asked. 14. Silence on the line. And what was HR Officer's response? The same every time, "We'll look into it." They never did. Did you document their non-response? I documented everything. I could almost hear her smile. "Miss Harrington, you've done half my job for me." Hearing her say this put me at ease. I realized how stressed I'd been living for months. I thought I should have gotten support much earlier. We met Wednesday evening at her office. Exposed brick, minimalist furniture, framed verdicts on the wall. Jennifer was 52, silver-haired, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed my files. Jennifer read in silence for 40 minutes. I counted the seconds between each page turn. "This is comprehensive," she said. "Unusually comprehensive. I'm a compliance officer. Documentation is what I do." She smiled. "The retaliation against Rachel Torres, that's your strongest evidence. They fired her 3 days after she filed a complaint. That's textbook. Will she need to be involved? If she's willing, her testimony would be powerful." Speaking with Rachel was crucial for the case. She was working retail now. She was struggling. She was understandably angry. When I told her my plan, despite everything, she didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need," she said. "They destroyed my career. I want them to pay." Jennifer filed the EEOC complaint on Friday. Formal charges of discrimination, hostile work environment, and retaliation. Pattern and practice violations spanning 14 months. The wheels of federal justice were turning. The first sign that Pinnacle knew something was wrong came the following Tuesday. Warren Nichols called me into his office. Same mahogany desk. Same leather chair. Same framed quote about our greatest asset. "Danielle," his voice was different, tighter. "I've been informed that an external complaint has been filed with a federal agency." "I'm aware." "You're aware?" His eyebrows rose. "Did you have something to do with this?" I kept my face neutral. "I've been filing complaints with HR for 14 months, Warren. Every single one was ignored. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to handle this internally." I tried 14 times. And what was the result? Only Rachel getting fired. This is a betrayal of what? I leaned forward. Of the company that ignored my documented concerns for over a year, of the HR department that protects harassers and fires victims, of the leadership team that calls female employees sweetheart and wonders why they have a gender discrimination problem. Warren's face reddened. You're going to regret this. Maybe. But Rachel Torres already regrets trusting this company. The 3 women being underpaid already regret staying silent. I'd rather regret fighting than regret not trying. I stood up. You'll be hearing from the EEOC soon, Warren. I'd suggest you start looking into things for real this time. I walked out before he could respond. It was my turn. The retaliation started within the week. My coworkers' eyes had changed. Some showed sympathy, most showed fear. A few looked like you asked for this. Have you ever been isolated at work for doing the right thing? The email removing me from the Henderson account arrived at 9:47 a.m. I'd been leading that project for 14 months. First, I was removed from 2 major projects, reassigned to routine audits that could have been handled by a junior analyst. Second, my access to certain financial systems was revoked. Security protocols, they claimed. Third, a performance review 3 months early suddenly appeared on my calendar. My supervisor, who had given me excellent ratings for 11 years, now had concerns about my judgment. Quite a coincidence, what do you think? Jennifer had warned me this would happen. They're building a paper trail, she said, trying to create justification for termination that predates the EEOC complaint. Can they fire me? They can try, but right now, every measure they take will be evidence of retaliation. Terminating someone under active EEOC investigation is legally reckless and foolish. I documented everything, every reassigned project, every revoked access, every manufactured performance concern. The compliance officer was building a compliance case against her own company. By the end of the month, the EEOC had formally opened an investigation. A federal investigator named Patricia Meadows was assigned to the case. She requested documents, interviews, compensation records for the past 5 years. Pinnacle's legal team scrambled to respond. I heard through the grapevine that Edward Sterling had called an emergency board meeting, that outside counsel had been retained, that the phrase exposure management was being used a lot. They were worried, they should have been. The investigation would take months. Federal agencies move slowly. But I'd been documenting for 14 months. I could be patient. When I saw the EEOC number on my phone, my heart stopped for a second. This was real now. I wasn't alone anymore. I had support. I didn't have to face all of this by myself. Justice was coming. Official channels, documented evidence, legal accountability. All I had to do was wait and keep documenting. Because at Pinnacle Financial Group, the paper trail was about to become very, very expensive. 2 months into the investigation. Waiting. The EEOC doesn't move fast. They're thorough, methodical, and careful. When building a case, that's exactly what you want. But my patience was running out. Living inside the case, the days blurred together. I felt trapped in a struggle I could never get out of. What was hardest for me, completely unlike my nature, was waiting passively. Every morning, looking in the mirror, I'd ask myself, is this worth it? Every day, I gave the same answer. Yes. Every morning at my desk felt like theater, pretending to care about reports while waiting for the call that would change everything. I kept going to work, kept doing my job, the diminished version of it they'd assigned me, kept documenting every slight, every reassignment, every passive-aggressive email from Warren Nichols' office. My file of retaliation evidence was now thicker than my original complaint. Meanwhile, Patricia Meadows was conducting interviews. Former employees, current employees, women who'd filed complaints years ago and been quietly transferred or pushed out. The pattern was becoming clear. Jennifer called me on a Thursday evening. Patricia found 3 other women, she said. Different departments, same story. Filed complaints, got ignored, eventually left the company. How far back? 7 years. 7 years. 7 years of women documenting discrimination. 7 years of Warren Nichols saying, we'll look into it. 7 years of a company protecting itself instead of its employees. I wasn't the first. I was just the first one who'd refused to stay quiet. Here's what I knew by month 3 of the investigation. Pinnacle Financial Group was exposed, not just for my complaints for a decade of systemic failures. The EEOC subpoenaed compensation records dating back to the company's founding with a court order. The pattern that emerged was now undeniable. At Pinnacle, women earned an average of 23% less than men in the same positions. The pay gap widened even more at senior levels. And what about the few women who complained? Their performance reviews mysteriously declined, their projects were reassigned, and their careers stalled. Ryan Mercer, Rachel's harasser, had 3 previous complaints against him. All 3 had been handled internally. Which meant the complainants had been transferred, Ryan had received coaching, and nothing had changed. Warren Nichols had known. He'd known for years. I previously thought Warren hadn't done anything, but that wasn't actually true. He had knowingly protected a corrupt system. My sister Emily met me for dinner that week, Italian place in the West Village. She'd been worried about me, said I'd been distant, distracted, living inside my own head. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm fine. Danielle." I set down my fork. "I'm tired, Em. I'm tired of being the one who fights while everyone else looks away. I'm tired of documenting injustice and watching nothing change. I'm tired of being patient. But the investigation is moving forward. That's something. It's something, but it's slow, and every day I go into that office, I feel like I'm performing, pretending everything is normal when nothing is normal." Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing, even if it's hard, especially because it's hard." I wanted to believe her. Month 4. Patricia Meadows called Jennifer with an update. "The EEOC is ready to issue findings." Jennifer told me, "Probable cause determination. They found sufficient evidence of discrimination and retaliation." What does that mean? It means Pinnacle has the option to settle with the EEOC. They can also choose to fight it in court, but given what Patricia has uncovered, that would be financial suicide. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like validation. Like 14 months of documentation had finally meant something. What happens next? Conciliation. The EEOC will propose remedies. Back pay for affected employees, policy changes, training requirements, and monetary damages. How much? That depends on how cooperative Pinnacle wants to be. Spoiler, they didn't want to be cooperative. Pinnacle's legal team rejected the first settlement offer, $400,000 and policy reforms. They called it excessive and unwarranted. Jennifer was very calm. She wasn't surprised, didn't panic. Companies like Pinnacle always fight at first. They're so confident that they're sure they can outlast the government. But given the circumstances, they're definitely wrong. Apparently, they'll have to learn this the hard way. The EEOC came back with a revised demand, $800,000, plus an independent monitor to oversee HR practices for 2 years, rejected again. Jennifer didn't flinch when she said no. I realized I'd hired exactly the right person. "They're posturing," Jennifer said. "Edward Sterling doesn't want to admit fault. His board doesn't want the headline. They'll settle eventually, but they need to feel like they fought." I wasn't interested in letting them feel anything. "What if I want to pursue damages independently?" I asked. "Separate from the EEOC?" Jennifer paused. "You could file a personal lawsuit. Discrimination, retaliation, hostile work environment. With the EEOC findings, you'd have significant leverage. And Rachel? She'd have an even stronger case. Wrongful termination is textbook. 3 days after filing a complaint, no jury would buy the performance concerns excuse. I called Rachel that night, explained the option. She was quiet for a long moment. She listened carefully. "I'm in," she said finally. "I want them to feel what I felt when they fired me. Whatever it takes." 2 weeks later, Jennifer filed a joint civil lawsuit. Danielle Harrington and Rachel Torres versus Pinnacle Financial Group, Warren Nichols and Edward Sterling. Charges: discrimination, harassment, retaliation, wrongful termination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Damages sought: $6.5 million. The lawsuit made the Wall Street Journal. Small item buried in the legal section. But in finance, everyone reads the legal section. Pinnacle's stock dipped 3% the day the story ran. We were finally making progress. Edward Sterling issued a statement. "We are confident in our HR practices and will vigorously defend against these baseless allegations." Baseless. after 14 complaints, after federal findings of probable cause, after 7 years of documented patterns. Baseless. Warren Nichols didn't issue a statement, but I heard from colleagues that he'd stopped coming to work. Working remotely, his assistant said. Translation, hiding. The board called an emergency session, 3 hours behind closed doors. I wasn't privy to what happened, but the results became clear soon enough. The next morning, I received an email from Edward Sterling's office. Miss Harrington, the board would like to discuss a resolution to the current matter. Please contact outside counsel at your earliest convenience. They were ready to talk. The waiting was over now, and everything was accelerating. The negotiation took 3 weeks. Conference rooms at Jennifer's firm. Lawyers on both sides, numbers thrown back and forth like weapons. Pinnacle's opening offer, $800,000 combined for me and Rachel, plus my resignation, plus a non-disclosure agreement that would seal everything forever. Jennifer laughed out loud when she heard it. They want you to resign and stay quiet after what they've put you through? What should we counter with? The truth and the number we're actually owed. Our counter, $4.8 million total. Back pay adjustments for every affected female employee identified by the EEOC. Policy reforms overseen by an independent monitor. Mandatory training created with input from discrimination experts. Warren Nichols' termination. Ryan Mercer's termination, and no non-disclosure agreement. They'll never agree to public disclosure, Jennifer warned. Then we go to trial. The next round came back, $2.2 million. Warren Nichols placed on administrative leave. Ryan Mercer reassigned. India with limited carve-outs. The numbers being discussed were huge, but still not enough. This isn't about the money, I told Jennifer. It's about accountability. If they want this to end, they need to admit what they did, publicly. That's exactly what I want them to understand. Jennifer nodded. I'll make sure they understand. Week 3. Final meeting. Jennifer, me, Rachel, and 3 lawyers from Pinnacle's outside counsel. Edward Sterling was conspicuously absent. The lead attorney, a silver-haired partner named Douglas Hart, slid a document across the table. Our final offer is $4.2 million, to be split between Miss Harrington and Miss Torres. Warren Nichols will be terminated for cause. Ryan Mercer will be terminated. An independent auditor will oversee HR practices for 3 years. And mandatory compliance training developed in consultation with outside experts will be required for all managers. Jennifer reviewed the document, looked at me. The NDA? Limited scope. You can discuss the outcome publicly. You cannot disclose specific internal documents or communications. I looked at Rachel. She nodded. What about admission of fault? I asked. Douglas Hart's jaw tightened. The company will issue a statement acknowledging past deficiencies in HR practices and committing to systemic reform. Not quite an apology, but close enough. One more thing, I said. Hart raised an eyebrow. The mandatory training program, I want my name on it, the Harrington Protocol, so everyone who goes through that training knows why it exists. Silence. Hart glanced at his colleagues, back at me. That's unusual. So is ignoring 14 complaints. More silence. We'll need to discuss with the board. They discussed. The board agreed. I signed my name slowly, carefully. 14 months compressed into one signature. Pinnacle Financial Group didn't just pay $4.2 million. They created a training program with my name attached. Every new employee, every manager, every executive, learning about discrimination, retaliation, and the consequences of ignoring complaints. Named after the woman who'd filed 14 complaints and been ignored 14 times. Named after me. Warren Nichols' termination was announced the following Monday. The termination notice made no mention of the investigation or the settlement, but everyone knew. The rumor mill had been working overtime. By Tuesday, 3 different colleagues had stopped by my desk quietly, cautiously to say they'd heard what happened. You actually did it, one of them whispered. I didn't think anyone could take them on. Ryan Mercer was quietly terminated the same week. One day his desk was full, the next day it was empty. The HR department made no announcement. His nameplate disappeared. Edward Sterling announced his retirement 3 months later. The press release called it a planned transition. The timing 6 months after the settlement was purely coincidental. Rachel received $1.8 million of the settlement, enough to restart her career, to pay off her loans. to recover from 8 months of financial instability caused by being fired for speaking up. She called me the day the check cleared. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You changed my life. You changed it yourself. You spoke up. You documented, and you were patient. I trusted you." Hearing her say that reminded me I no longer needed to feel guilty. I'd been living with that feeling for a long time. Neither of us had given up, and now we'd won. I received $2.4 million. Part of that was back pay compensation adjustments for the years I'd been underpaid relative to male colleagues. Part was damages for retaliation. Part was the settlement for emotional distress. The settlement check had 8 digits. I stared at it for a full minute before depositing it. I could have retired, could have walked away from finance entirely, started over somewhere no one knew my name. Instead, as you might guess, I didn't choose that path. I started a compliance consulting firm. I specialized in workplace culture audits, identifying discrimination patterns, training programs for companies that didn't want to become the next Pinnacle. My first client was a mid-sized tech company in Brooklyn. They'd read about the settlement in the journal, wanted someone who understood what bad HR practices looked like and how to fix them. "We don't want to end up in your situation," the CEO said. "Then don't ignore complaints. Document everything. Create systems that protect employees, not just the company." That's it. That's the hard part. Most companies skip it. They didn't skip it. Neither did my next clients. Turns out, there was a market for someone who'd fought the system and won. 6 months after the settlement, I got a call from a young analyst at Pinnacle. She'd gone through the Harrington Protocol training the week before. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I didn't know who you were before the training. Now I do, and I think what you did matters." Why's that? Because last week I saw something that didn't feel right. A manager making comments to a colleague. Before the training, I would have looked away. After, I documented it, filed a report. What happened? HR called me within 24 hours. The manager received a formal warning. The colleague was offered support resources. I felt something shift. Not quite victory. Closer to hope. But I kept going. Sometimes, fighting isn't about winning. It's about refusing to participate in your own erasure. Here's what I learned from 18 months of fighting Pinnacle Financial Group. Internal systems protect the company, not you. When the company's interests conflict with yours, guess who loses? Federal agencies exist for a reason. The EEOC, OSHA, the Department of Labor, these aren't bureaucratic obstacles. They are tools. They have subpoena power. They have settlement authority. They have the ability to force accountability that internal channels never will. Documentation is everything. The reason I won wasn't because I was louder, angrier, or more persistent than the women who came before me. It was because I documented everything. And finally, if you're looking for lasting accountability that changes systems, not just outcomes, patience is a very powerful strategy. Do you agree? Share your thoughts in the comments. The full yellow file playlist's waiting, or discover other color files for more office revenge. See you in the next file.